Hey YouTube, this is Run to Christ, and this is Studies in the Spirituality of Jesuits, and the title, St. Ignatius of Loyola and the Jews.
He knows the truth.
Let's wake them up then, shall we?
So the Jews in early years were persecuted and they went 400 years under Muslim rule. The Jews flourished more than ever before. They enjoyed a time of prosperity, creativity, and achieved great strides in poetry and rabbinic literature, medicine and philosophy. So successful was this period that the latter half became known as the golden era of the Jews in Spain. So what happened next is a fanatical Almohads and their ultimatum, Islam or death. Many Jews fled north to Christian Spain, where the Reconquista was making its slow progress. Now, if we jump forward a bit in time here, a succession of humanist kings in Christian Spain from the 11th to 14th centuries showered the Jews with honours and favours because of their economic and creative abilities. Ferdinand I of Castile, and this is in 1027 to 1065 was his reign, granted the Jews equal rights with Christians and even gave them important positions in his court. Now this is the beginning of what is known as the era of papal court Jews. Okay, the Jews were given high positions in the courts next to kings so that they could mediate between the Pope and the King when it came to finances. Now this is still happening today. This is why later on the Rothschilds and families such as that, this is how they gained power. The Rothschilds are called the guardians of the papal treasury. Continuing in Loyola and the Jews, Jewish prestige and power were especially evident in the court of Toledo, the capital of Castile, and among the nobles. No king was without a Jewish minister, councillor or physician. Assuming control of court finances, Jews also lent money and collected taxes. Envy of their success mounted over the years, however, to such a fever pitch that in 1391, 4,000 Jews were killed in Seville. Carnage spread throughout Spain, sweeping through 70 Jewish communities, until in the end, some 50,000 Jews were dead, and many more had been baptized. In some districts, not a single Jew was left. So the presence of this large number of newly baptized Jews, or conversos as they were called, would to a large extent determine the future of Jews in Spain. Many adhered outwardly to Christianity, but in varying degrees continued secretly to practice Judaism. This is where we get the term crypto-Jew, which just means hidden Jew. By 1492, not one Jew remained in Spain. It cites the establishment of the Inquisition, segregation of Jews into separate quarters, and expulsion of the Jews from Andalusia as steps that were taken, but still, the conversos problem remained. The decree states, "We have been informed by the inquisitors and by other persons that the mingling of Jews with Christians leads to the worst evils." So, over the years, as sentiment against the Jews grew, the distinction between these groups became blurred, and that between converted and non-converted Jews seemed to disappear. Their bad blood, mala sangre, many thought made all the Jews, whether converted or not, evil and perverse. Now this is genetic racism at its finest, and it was perpetrated by the Catholic Church. And everybody who was Catholic, especially in Spain, that's what they believed. Because the Spanish, as you're about to find out, had a really big deal about blood and who you were related to. Eventually, it continues to say, limpieza de sangre, purity of blood was a major concern. Purity of blood? So that's rather like how Adolf Hitler used to think, wasn't it? Purity of the Aryan race. Yeah, the purity of blood was a major concern. The bad blood made them evil and perverse. This is just pure out and out racism. Judaism had not become only a religious problem, but an ethnic one as well. It was in this context that Ignatius of Loyola, the 7th son of an old Basque family, the Onaz of Loyola, hardly 1 year before the edict of expulsion was signed, so he cannot be a Jew. It's just impossible, because the genetic test done in 2015 proves that they've had the same bloodline for thousands of years. So it goes on. He probably met no Jews during his childhood in Spain. The first mention of any kind of connection that he might have had with Jews or Jewish Christians does not occur until he was interrogated by the Inquisition soon after his conversion. Here perhaps is his early attitude towards Jewish Christians revealed. So Ignatius, while at Alcala studying and giving the spiritual exercises, Ignatius was investigated 3 times by the Inquisition. You would think if the Inquisition investigated him 3 times for being possibly a crypto-Jew, that they would have found out. Polanco in his Vita Ignati Loyoli records the interrogation as follows. When after the time described, the vicar Figuero came to question him, and among other things asked him if he recommended observance of the Sabbath, that is Saturday, Ignatius replied, "For Saturdays I recommend special devotion to Our Lady, and I know of no other observances for Saturday. Moreover, in my country, there are no Jews." So, how can he be a Jew if there's no Jews in the country, and for the past hundreds of years have been persecuted? There's a Purity of Blood Act signed into law, which, by the way, was only taken out of law in the 20th century. Doubtful of Ignatius' origins, Figuero had dared to ask in veiled terms if his suspect were not indeed a converso who remained faithful to the Jewish devotions. Although it is difficult to say precisely what Ignatius intended by his response, it would not be entirely unlikely that his answer to Vicar Figuero indicates that the Basque from Loyola in the province of, I don't even know how to pronounce that, Guipuzcoa? I don't know.
Guipúzcoa.
Found the suggestion offensive. This would certainly be in keeping with the attitude of most Guipuzcoans, who boasted that no Jew was even allowed to remain overnight in their province. Perhaps Ignatius too shared the sentiments of his fellow Guipuzcoans, who assumed a superior stand to even old Christians from other Spanish provinces. So his whole region and where he's from, they were basically racist towards the Jews. They weren't even allowed to stay there overnight in the province. And some people would like me to believe that Ignatius Loyola was a crypto-Jew, and that somewhere in his Spanish noble racist family, the Onaz of Loyola, somewhere they married a Marrano and had babies. It's just not true. But that brings me to the final point I would like to make. Not until his years of study at the University of Paris did Ignatius' more mature attitude become gradually recognisable. There he met Diego Leones. Though his Christian faith descended from 3 generations, Diego, because of his great-grandfather's Jewish origin, was still considered a Jew. So this information about Diego Leones will no doubt get the conspiracy theorists who want to blame everything on the Jews saying, see, the Jesuits were Jews. Yeah, but that's not true. That was only one guy, Diego Leones, right? And if you guys had known this, you would have brought it up already. Diego Leones ended up becoming the 2nd superior general after Ignatius Loyola died. So, what then, are we to think that the Jesuits were Jews because of this? I think not. Because even though Ignatius Loyola was favourable towards the Jews, the Pope eventually enacted a papal bull which Ignatius did not object to. Until 1555, Ignatius had dealt only with Jews who wished to convert. The issue of the bull Cum Nimi Absurdum, with its unparalleled restrictions on the Jews of Rome, provides us with the opportunity to see Ignatius' attitude towards Jews who had no intention of converting. Issued in 1555 by Pope Paul IV, the papal document mirrors what many 16th century theologians had to say about the Jews. You can pause it and read it. To overcome the evil power the Jews were gaining, the Holy See instituted measures of unprecedented harshness. The first of these was the establishment, for the first time in Rome and other papal cities, of obligatory Jewish quarters. After more than 1500 years of continuous residence in Rome, the Jews were to live in a ghetto with only one gate to enter by. That's right, folks. The Holy Roman Empire was the one that started the Jewish ghettos. It did not come by the Nazis. It was the Holy Roman Empire. Speaking of Nazis though, there was one famous Jew that lived in a German ghetto, a Holy Roman Empire Jewish ghetto, and that was Mayer D. Rothschild. It goes on to say, all synagogues except one in each city were to be destroyed, and all Jews were to wear badges to indicate their Jewishness. And Ignatius Loyola went along with it to defend it. So in 1555, and for many years afterward, the Pope, as head of the government of the Papal States, quite openly violated the equality and human dignity of the Jews, and precisely for religious reasons. When the bull was published, Ignatius sent copies of it far and wide, with instructions to pass them around to other Jesuit houses after they had been read. In this way, he not only helped promulgate the bull, but he seems to have agreed with it. So there was some Jesuits that were Jews, but they were not crypto-Jews. It was well known that these people were new Christians. They did not practice Judaism, because if they did, they would have been treated like how Rome treated Jews who refused to convert. They would have been killed or expelled from the land. And Loyola was in favour of that, to protect the one true faith. What happened next? Does this give ammo to fire at the Jewish New World Order? Well, it would certainly seem that way. But let's not get ahead of ourselves, because there's still a lot of history that follows the appointment of a Jew, or at least by ancestry, Diego Lainez, to the Superior General. What happened after that, however, should be taken note of, and here we go. The press for restrictive legislation did not stop at the death of the first general, that's Loyola. Even in the time of Lainez, the second Superior General of the Jesuits, who was himself of Jewish blood, there were renewed attempts to restrict admission of new Christians to the society. The third general, Francis Borgia, also endured and resisted the same harangue as Ignatius from advocates in Spain of the purity of blood. But it was not until the time of the fifth general, Claudio Acquaviva, that those who sought to exclude anyone from Jewish lineage finally won out. In 1592, Acquaviva wrote to the provincials of Spain, that's the Jesuits, ordering them not to receive new Christians into the society. The final blow to the Ignatian attitude of openness came in 1593 at the Fifth General Congregation, that's where they decide the Superior General. With the passage of its Decree 52, no one of Jewish or Muslim backgrounds could ever enter the society. Further, not even the General could dispense from this impediment. The characteristic outlook of the Spanish elite had finally won out. In a similar fashion, the impediment of origin remained unchanged from 1593 until well into our 20th century. It was 1946 to be exact, as we see here. The General Congregation, convened in 1946, as soon as possible after the close of World War II, abrogated the impediment of origin. So you can see that from 1593 to 1946, no Jew or Muslim was allowed in the Jesuits. There was only a few of them originally, and they were not crypto Jews. It was well known that they were Jews, they were not hidden. So this, I feel, goes a long way to debunking any notion that Zionist Jews created the Jesuits. The Jesuits wanted to convert Jews and kill anyone that didn't. I really hope that you've enjoyed this video. If you did, please hit the like button and share it with your friends. Subscribe if you haven't already. This has been Run to Christ. God bless you all.
Let's wake them up then, shall we?